Welcome to Ridgewood Talks. Through this podcast, we will be introducing you to some of the leaders and legends in our village. We'll keep you updated about fascinating local events. We'll dig into the town's hot topics and so much more. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Jeannie Johnson, the founder of Ridgewood Talks and Ridgewood Walks. The goal of these initiatives is to create a kinder, more connected, and more vibrant community. I'm thrilled to be hosting this podcast with my good friend and all-around wonderful guy, Jordan Kaufman. We look forward to meeting with you weekly and hearing your thoughts on who and what you'd like to learn about in our beautiful hometown. For now, be kind, do good, and enjoy this episode. Here we go. Hey everybody, here we are with Dr. Mark Schwarz from the Ridgewood Public School System. He is our new superintendent. And Mark, you have been on the job for what, 18 months?
About 18 months, yeah. I started in July 23.
And how's it going?
It's going really well. I'm really blessed to be here. Ridgewood is a fantastic community. Our schools have such I know that the tagline is tradition of excellence,
Right.
But there truly is a tradition of excellence in Ridgewood Public Schools. That said, there's plenty of work to do, and I've got a great team to do it with, so I'm really fortunate.
Yeah, I'm really happy about all of the new people that have been put in place. They're quality professionals, and it's really, really great for our community after all of the chaos that we went through COVID. It's really nice to have everything kind of settled down now, and I know you just put in a new slate of officers for the board. Well, not really a whole new slate, but it's a new administration, right?
Yeah, well, we had a couple new things going on. So first of all, the community elects the Board of Education, and I'm employed by the board, so I report to them. Of course, at our recent Board of Education meeting, we did swear in our newest member, Mary Louise Handy, who actually just retired from Ridgewood Public Schools, so it's great to have somebody who knows the schools from the inside as well.
Right.
And last year we brought in Mary McCallie as a new board member who's long been involved with our school system. So yeah, we have a really strong board, very independently minded members, very conscientious. They all care deeply about the quality of our schools, so I'm really, really grateful to work with all of them. We also conducted an administrative realignment, and I've been really working to fill some key positions in the district myself. So we really had the administrative team come together really well right now, recently especially, and everyone seems to be working very well together. Grateful for that.
That's good. That's great. I know that you have a new website, you have a newsletter that's out there, and I think the last count, there's about 5,700 students in the district. Is that right?
55, yeah,
Really?
but it floats,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
We've seen a little bit of a declining enrollment. With a community like Ridgewood, we don't expect that to be too dramatic.
Right.
We'll be doing a demographic study soon, as we haven't done one in a little while. But it does seem as though we talked about this in our budget presentation, and we'll address it in the budget presentation that's coming up in a few months as well. But we are seeing a slight decline in enrollment, which seems to be part of a national trend. Just people in the United States are having fewer and fewer children. So,
Right.
But nevertheless, I mean, there's such a demand for people to live in Ridgewood. We don't expect that to be a wild swing.
Right, right. Well, the interesting thing that I found is that 55% of the residents that live here in Ridgewood don't have children in the district, which was really a shock for me to know that there are more people living here that are, empty nesters than there are people with children in the district. And then the other thing that I found striking is that 64% of taxpayer revenue goes to the schools, right? So you have the new website, you have the newsletter, and this platform is really designed to help people like me, the empty nester, figure out what's going on there, what are you guys doing, what's new, what's exciting. Tell us more.
So communication is very important to us. I'm really blessed to have inherited an excellent public information officer in Christine Corliss.
Right.
Many folks in the community have gotten to know Christine. She comes to our board meetings, and she really manages all of our communications. And she does a pretty good amount of public interfacing when people have community concerns. If we don't really, it's not really exactly clear where they should go. So I would encourage anyone to look her up on our website. If you have any questions about the district, whether you have kids in the district or not, we want to hear from you, and she's a great point of contact. But we together have designed a few different, basically a communication strategy, which effectively consists of a monthly newsletter, which primarily goes to Ridgewood families. But if you're interested in receiving that newsletter, we have some ways we can get that to you. Additionally, I have a superintendent coffee that goes out that we invite folks to. Again, I want to be clear. We have a communication network for the school, but anyone's welcome to come to the coffee. If you go to the website, you can see all that information. And if you subscribe to us on social media, you'll get all this information, including the newsletter. That's probably the easiest way to do it in today's world.
Can I just pause there for 1 minute? Because whoever is doing your social media is doing a phenomenal job. It really stepped up in the last couple of months.
Yeah, well, that is definitely Christine. She's kind of, but she's doing a really nice job too of working with the schools and creating pipelines for communication. The schools themselves also though have individual folks, particularly our tech coaches, who also step up to promote the schools as well. So they're also involved in social media, but Christine coordinates all of it.
Right.
So if you don't follow the schools, I mean, I really recommend that you would, including those folks out there who might not have kids in the school right now. We're continuing this tradition of excellence. We know that the quality of our schools serves our community well when our kids are highly engaged. You know, they're healthier, they're happier. They're certainly not causing trouble in town when they're really engaged in school.
For sure.
And then also, we want to maintain that reputation, that tradition. We know that the quality of our schools connects to property value, but we also know that the work we do in our schools and the cost related to that work is a burden to our community members. So we want to make sure that those dollars are well spent,
right,
and that we're being transparent about the efforts that we're making.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that transparency. I think that that's kind of a crossover that the village has implemented as well, making sure that all of the taxpayers know exactly where our dollars are going, and it's so appreciated. And because we have social media, it is so much easier for residents to find information. And again, everything that you post, just about everything, I put on the Ridgewood Talks Facebook page too. So it does get a broader reach. So for those of you who are listening and watching, please log on to Ridgewood Talks and on Facebook, and you can get all of the district information too. So we talked the last time we had a podcast with you without video, and we talked about the strategic planning initiative. That was a big deal. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it is a big deal because a strategic plan, when done correctly, doesn't just produce a document. It really produces a normed organization. So the strategic planning effort that took place about 5 years ago, long before I got here, was done in a very inclusive way. And as a result of that, despite some of the tumult of COVID and some leadership transitions, there was a considerable amount of very good work that continued despite all that. So I actually inherited the tail end of some really, really good work, specifically around the academic habits and behaviors of students, which is really important, both from I can say experientially, but it's also supported by research. And that has been going on behind the scenes and undergirding a lot of the work in the schools. So something that we're looking to do with this next strategic plan that we're developing is really staying focused on that work.
I want to hear more about that. What does that mean, the academic habits of students?
So specifically, we particularly call it the habits of work, and it refers to habits such as responsibility, respect in school, and making sure that students are engaging in the types of behaviors that make students academically successful.
Gotcha.
You know, school should be fun to some extent, right? School's always going to have a level of social reward for students. They're going to want to go there for various activities. They might like lunch, they might like physical education, but it's also really important that we are explicit, not just implicit, about our expectations for what makes students successful. So being able to pay attention in class, showing respect for your peers and for adults, being responsible, being reflective. So you're not just being a passive learner, but rather staying active in your education and recognizing if you're struggling with something and making an effort to reach out and to find that help where it is. To advocate for yourself,
right.
Exactly. And then as students get older too, to take responsibility for your grades, take responsibility for your schedule, take responsibility for your sleep. So it extends beyond the classroom, but we want to, often in schools, these are implicit, and often families that understand the importance of these things, they might make them explicit in their home, but they'll have those expectations at home, and kids will just kind of come up with them. But we know from research and from direct experience that not all families and not all students just come up with that sense.
Right.
So if it's important enough if it's a predictor of future performance, then why would we not focus on being explicit about that?
I really like that because the last time we spoke, you talked about the importance of being able to look an adult in the eye, shake their hand. Those are really important people skills as we get through life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I really appreciate that the school is focusing on that and helping kids earn confidence in doing those sorts of things. So, so again, now going back to that strategic planning initiative, thank you for engaging the community on that too.
Absolutely.
And so when will the reports be out on that, and when can we find out, what's next?
Well, thanks so much for your interest, and it is important. And what it is important to us to make sure that this is a community-wide event, not just something that is limited to school personnel or just parents of current students.
Mm-hmm.
But we're in the process now of building out an action plan. There's multiple phases, so there's multiple domains for this plan. So we have different teams working within those domains, and we'll be presenting to the public on April 7th.
Okay.
We have a board meeting on April 7th, and that's when we'll be rolling out this plan. The work will be largely completed by March 10th, but we'll be doing some internal vetting and a little bit of preliminary work with the board as well. But if you're interested and you want to be involved, please, we'd love to have you. If you want to see where the emphases that we're making and placing on our schools in response to all the feedback that we've gotten, I would encourage everyone to make themselves available for the 7th. Again, you don't have to come to our board meetings in person if you're new to the conversation here. You can also just attend virtually. We also record them, so even if you want to view them after the fact, asynchronously.
That's right.
I really encourage folks to do that. And if you haven't been to a coffee, it's the same thing. They're actually virtual. I've played around with having them in person, and it's just not very convenient for folks. And if you're having a live meeting and people are attending virtually, sometimes they feel like they're not really at the same level of active participation.
Mm-hmm.
So we've just elected to keep that virtual. Gives
that.
me an extra flexibility to be home potentially while we do it. But we record those meetings as well. We post them unedited so that if anyone wants to see the responses or hear the comments or be a part of the conversation, even if it's after the fact, they can join us there. We also make a good effort at the Board of Education meeting. I know we wanted to talk about this, so I'm just going to kind of jump into it. But a Board of Education meeting, folks should recognize that is an official meeting of the board, and the board is effectively a government agent. And as a result of that, they have to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. And there are very specific protocols regarding what should happen and limitations on how board members can participate and how the public can participate. It's a limited public forum. But the superintendent coffee is a different type of forum. It's less formal. It's something that I manage, and it's not an official meeting of the Board of Education, meaning that there's no official governmental business that's happening there.
It's just a chat, just like we're having here.
Exactly, except that everyone can jump in and we open up to calls. We use the webinar format, so if you go on, it's not like you have to worry about people seeing you.
Right.
You never have to show your face. But we do ask that you just share your name. We prefer it if you do, just so that way we know who we're talking to and we can get back to y'all. But one of the features that we try to do in that meeting is I try to wrap up conversations that have gone on at the board and conversations and comments that come up during the coffee. So the next month I'll try to touch on all the points of concern previously. And although we can't always reach resolution for everybody, we do try to close the loop as best we can with folks.
That's great. So speaking of that now, what's the hottest topic that's going on at the school right now in the district?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we're focused on right now is the strategic plan.
Right.
And that can seem a little dormant because there's so much action, because we spent so much time focusing on that and talking about that during the year. But other than that, I would say it's the budget. So this is budget season. If you're interested in being part, again, if you're a tax-paying citizen of the community, then a resident of the community, I would definitely recommend you pay attention to what's going on in the schools. On March 24th, we'll fact check that date, but it's on the website. March 24th, I believe, is our preliminary budget hearing. So that's when we will be. And my goal is there's a preliminary budget and a final budget because the state requires us to have those in phases.
Right.
But in my experience as a superintendent, it's really unproductive to try to make decisions after the preliminary budget. So my team, we did it last year. We're going to do it again this year. We're on a timeline to have a lot of clarity around what's in the budget, what's not in the budget, what the tax impact is at the March 24th meeting. I know our board members are very conscientious about our taxpayers. We talk about fiscal responsibility all the time. And even at our reorg meeting on January 6th, there was a robust discussion around a conversation we had, reviving a conversation of last year of we have this very tight timeline with the state in terms of when the governor releases school aid numbers, and then when we actually do the preliminary budget. So we often feel very squeezed. There's actually a lot of movement within educational advocates right now to make sure that those numbers get released sooner, so that way communities can feel more informed.
That's so helpful.
Well, and the budget, the budget is struck much sooner than that. So it's really just about the state making a commitment to getting those numbers out sooner, and we're hoping that they will. But regardless, what we did last year and what we intend to do this year is to release the presentation prior to the 24th meeting, because after the 24th meeting, it's very hard to make changes. We advertise the budget, it gets approved by the county, and then there's a very arduous process, and it's a confusing process for the taxpayers if we make changes from that point.
Right.
So what we try to do is be very transparent at that meeting. And in order for people to come, if they have concerns or if they want something in the budget or don't want something in the budget or just have something they want to share, they should have a sense as to what's coming in advance. So we're going to release some level of a version of the presentation for public review. It's probably not going to be too far in advance, but we're striving to have that release along with the actual agenda, which would be released the Friday before. Gotcha. So if you're interested in being involved in that process, keep your eyes out for that agenda, which would be released, and the pre-release of the presentation on that Friday before March 24th.
Right, and it's really important for taxpayers if you're interested in this, because there was a time where taxpayers were able to vote on whether the budget passed or not, and that window closed, so they're not able to do that anymore, which frankly I'm fine with that personally, because there were something like 11% of our community went out and voted for or against the budget, and then if the budget didn't pass, then the village council was tasked with going to take out whatever it was, and they didn't really know what should be taken out. So I love that you engage the community in that. It's wonderful to me. And I also think one of the things that community members don't recognize is that there's very little wiggle room with your budget. You are mandated to follow certain guidelines. And also, I think something that maybe voters or residents don't recognize is that the Board of Education really has more of a fiduciary role than it does for building curriculum or solving any of the problems within the classroom or with students. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think the best way to characterize the board is it's really a governing body.
Right.
The responsibility is governance.
Right.
So governance comes out most apparently in our policies and regulations, and also to your point about in fiduciary responsibilities in approving the budget. There are other responsibilities that are important. They do vet our curricular choices, but really their job, as New Jersey school boards use the phrase that it's their job to make sure the schools are well run, but not to run the schools.
Right.
Yeah, there are very specific certifications and qualifications that are required for folks to be able to make educational decisions for students. But that said, I think it's important for them to be able to govern well. I believe in making sure that we have a very well-informed and educated board. So a big part of my responsibility is ensuring that we have systems, structures, and processes so that way our board members are some of the best educated folks on the schools.
Right.
And so that way they know we're all on the same page in terms of what our vision and mission and goals are and values are. So that way when we're making difficult decisions, and because we have financial limitations and physical limitations in terms of our building structures, we have to make judicious decisions, and especially also to be responsible to the taxpayer. And so it's important that we are explicit as possible before we have to make those difficult decisions regarding what our values are and what our decision-making criteria are.
Right. And the other thing that I always am struck by is how much of the budget actually goes into insurance and benefits and things like that. It's what percentage of your budget is that?
Well, about 75% of our budget are those types of fixed costs.
Right.
And particularly health benefits and salaries and really personnel related costs are about 75% of our budget. And then there are other fixed costs that we can do a little about, transportation.
Right.
So I mean, when you talk about our discretionary
building maintenance.
So when you talk about that's one of those areas that actually school districts can run into trouble with, because many maintenance things that you need to do for your building, theoretically you can always say, well, we'll do that next year. We'll do that next year. And that's called deferred maintenance. And that is something that we're dealing with a little bit here.
Well, the windows.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the school, depends on the site, right? We I just this morning got a draft of a comprehensive facilities assessment that we commissioned. And so And it's really a comprehensive look as to what the current state of things are. And I can tell you as compared to my prior district and the state those buildings were in, I think our boards have done a very good job over time of keeping up with our schools. There are many things that we definitely need to improve upon. There are some areas where we know we have HVAC systems that were at Ridge and Glen that were queued up and ready to go in terms of moving forward with projects on. But there is it's a big district. We have a lot of buildings, and we're trying to, and we want to make sure that we're being as judicious and responsible and forward thinking, so that way we can manage as much of that within our annual budget. So that way we don't end up in a circumstance where the only way to catch up is by asking for a second question or referendum.
Well, a couple of things that I want to touch on with that is, first of all, we have 9 schools in the district, right? How much square footage is there? It's ridiculous.
I don't have that updated number, but
I remember someone telling me, so it's ridiculous.
And it's actually 10 schools because we have Glen School, which is a pre-K school.
Right. So we have 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, a high school, and then we
pre-K building, and then we also have the district office.
And then you have the Ed Center, right. So that's a lot of buildings to oversee. And the thing that I love the most about it, though, is because you have those fixed budgets, we have the Ridgewood Education Foundation that steps in and supplements some of that. And so do the HSAs. They supplement some of the things that the schools need. And so does Dad's Night. Dad's Night is a huge contributor to, some of the things that at least what Hawes and Somerville, is it Hawes, Somerville, and Travell?
It's Hawes and Somerville.
It's Hawes and Somerville. Sorry about that. I should know that because the producer of this show is a big Dad's Night guy. But anyway, so it's great that we have a lot of community involvement and a lot of money that funnels into our school, so we can accomplish some of the goals that the board budget can't accomplish. It's a real testament to this community for sure. So with that, I want to say we are looking forward to hearing from a representative from the district once a month here on this show. And Christine and I talked about, I know you're so busy that you won't be able to come in every month, but if you can, you're always welcome here.
Thank you.
So we did talk about having a representative, like I said, from the Ridgewood Education Foundation. I think everybody in town should know what that does and who manages it and why they're there. And I also think there are a lot of new people to the district. As a matter of fact, kindergarten registration is open now, right?
It is, yeah. Recently opened.
Okay, and so when does that close? How long do they have to register their kid?
Well, theoretically, we ask that people do that in a relatively short amount of time. I don't have the deadline with me right now, but obviously we have to enroll students, up until at any given point in time that they need to come into school. But I would encourage folks to please register your kids as soon as possible. One of the ways that we are being judicious about making sure that we control our personnel costs, again, I thank you so much for bringing up the fact that we have these fixed costs. We can only raise our tax levy by so much. Remember, we have a tradition here of sticking to the 2% tax levy increase cap, right? Yep. There are a couple of different allowable situations where you can go somewhat over. The board has chosen not to use those. We're really trying hard to stay within that 2% cap, even though inflationary costs are much higher than that. But that said, as we are we have to be very thoughtful about cost saving efficiencies. Right. So something that folks should know that we do is class size at the elementary level are a concern to a lot of folks.
Yes.
Right. Housing patterns don't always flesh out evenly.
Right.
So we could theoretically have a family moving into one area that's zoned or district to one of the elementary schools. That's going to require us to hire another teacher because it's going to put the class sizes over. So what we do is we try to allocate class distributions and class sizes as best we possibly can within those schools, and we make decisions in the spring regarding any new teachers that we need to hire. But here's the thing. If we have students come in late, like if they register at the end of the summer,
it can throw off the whole balance.
It can throw off the whole balance, and it's really a disservice if we try to create another section and hire another teacher, because that means some students are starting the year with a substitute.
Right.
So one of the things that we will do is a late entry family. If we're capped out at one of the elementary schools, we will send them to a different school where we have room.
Yeah.
So, and we're trying to be a little more proactive about that too. Like if people are new entrants to the district and they don't have any connection to the district and they don't have they don't have any connection to any of the school, they just want to be in Ridgewood, and they live squarely between two of our schools,
Right.
all of our elementary schools are very strong.
Right.
So what we'll do is if we'll actually look at where they live, and if we have more room at another school and our class sizes are getting bigger at that other school,
That makes sense.
at their grade level, we'll encourage those folks to register at the other school, or we'll register them at the other school. And that's how we're trying to balance, so that way we don't have exorbitant class sizes, but also we don't have too small of class sizes, which then are really not responsible to the taxpayer.
Right.
So those are some of the efforts that we're making behind the scenes.
Another thing that I really appreciate about Ridgewood Public Schools is the special ed programming. And I know that that was a big part of the strategic plan, and a big part of our budget goes to that too. I think that there is something, according to my notes, there is a special education parent advisory group, and they are going to be having a meeting on January 22nd coming up at 7:30 at the Ed Center, I believe. And so tell us a little bit more about the robust programming that you have for the special ed, and starting from pre-K all the way on up.
So special education is a really critical function of a public school. Students, we need to make sure that we're serving all of our students in every way and shape and form that they come to us. And we have a variety. We have families with students with a variety of needs. Some of those needs are so profound that there's just no way that we can have service for them in our schools. So we do have some students who do have to attend school out of district. But it's certainly our vision, and as it's my personal vision as well, that we need to do everything we can to ensure that we have a maximum amount of options for students, regardless of their need, so that way they can be well served in their local school, ideally, and if not in their local school, in a school within the district. It gives it, but by going to school in the district, it ensures that they have a peer group and a friend group
That's
outside
right.
of school that they're
So
familiar with.
important,
They feel
yeah.
more integrated in the community, it gives them the more traditional, normal experience of being a student. So that to do that, though, we have to be very thoughtful about our resources and recognizing how we can, and anticipating what needs we'll have, being responsive to the needs that present, and then making sure that we're building programs that are flexible and can accommodate a variety of students. So I've only been here for about a year and a half. Dr. Michelle Fenwick has been here for about 5 years, about 4.5 years now, and she just gave a really nice presentation that she and her team and I worked on, which we give a State of the Schools address.
Right.
I forgot to mention that. If you're really interested,
I wanted to mention that too, because it's on the website and it's fantastic.
And that'll be an annual occurrence. But I really believe, and again, this is for parents, but this is also for people who live in the community and who are just interested taxpayers in the community. I really believe that it's important that we do an annual audit of how we're doing.
Right.
And that we have to look at our longitudinal trends. It can't just be a snapshot of a moment in time. We have to look at how our trends are, and we have to be able to explain the trends that we're seeing and project where we want to be. And we have to sort of be in a constant state, or at least an annual state, of doing like a strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats analysis, because we are a large organization. We're a multi-million-dollar.
It's a $135 million budget.
Exactly. It's a significant enterprise that we're engaging in on behalf of our families and our kids. So we need to have some public-facing transparency beyond just a budget presentation. So what we seek to do is to use a variety of measures to figure out how our schools are doing. So we included some special education figures in that, as well as an analysis of a variety of subgroups. We use student surveys, we use SAT data, graduation rates, state assessment data. And I encourage everyone, it's posted on the website. You can watch the presentation. You can see the presentation, or you can actually watch the presentation being given. Something that came out when we met with our friends from CPAG last year, they had a variety of concerns and questions about the quality of our programs and about our number of offerings and the district trends, how much money the district is spending on our programs, because we can't provide the level of programming that parents always want for their child. There's a very prescriptive process about how an IEP for a child is developed, and it does require educator input. So some folks have, it's kind of the natural order of things that some parents aren't always going to agree with the recommendations of the school or the IEP team, even though the parent's part of the IEP team. So there will always be some level of education dispute. So we want to make sure that we're handling that well, and that's part of what the CPAG is for, is to help be an advocate for families But although, it's very important to me that we don't have an antagonistic role because
Right.
everyone's just trying to do the best they can for their kids.
And I think that's really important to remember, that everybody's doing the best they can, including the board. The board, by the way, for those of you who don't know, it's an all-volunteer board. Nobody gets paid to be on the Board of Education. So, like you said, everyone's doing the best job that they can to make sure that everyone gets that quality education, that we can continue that tradition of excellence at Ridgewood Public Schools.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that said, though, it's not necessarily enough to just say, well, we're doing the best that we can, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have to, because if you're doing the best part of doing the best we can, like we talked about this with trying to build this in students, is to be reflective,
Mm-hmm.
right? So doing the best we can isn't just, well, I made the best decision that I can make at that time and I'm going to wash my hands, right? Doing the best we can is about understanding that, listen, up to this point, we've made a good faith effort. We're going to assume positive intent in everybody who comes to the table with a concern. But when we listen to the concerns, we have to actually take a step back and say, okay, we're hearing these concerns. They matter to our community. We need to have a thoughtful response.
Mm-hmm.
And it can't just be a function of, well, my opinion is this and your opinion is that, because that's going to ultimately result in, like, well, we have to agree to disagree. We throw our hands up and we don't actually solve anything.
Right.
So using an evidentiary, data-driven approach, ideally, but it doesn't always have to be just pure numbers-based data, but actually engaging in survey work, engaging in reviews of the data that we have, looking at financial data as well as performance data, can really help us to get a sense of trends over time. And we can test people's hypotheses. There was some folks who were concerned that maybe we were spending more money on legal fees than we were spending on programming.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a thing called we called the State of Special Education, and that was presented. I believe that was in November. It's in the board meeting recordings. But we're gonna make that an annual occurrence, and we're gonna, in the same way that we base our actions and our improvements based on the State of the Schools address and those kinds of analyses, we're gonna do the same thing within special ed. But we try to be very transparent about our data, and our CPAG friends were grateful for what was shared. Certainly interested in what we're doing next with that data. But we were able to address some of those concerns. So, for example, like we have some data representations on how much is spent on legal fees versus placements, and
that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's democracy when you're going through and you're getting all the data and you're making the decision and you're making decisions that are based on what's best for the greater good, instead of just dictating what is going to be best for the school or what have you. So I really appreciate all the effort that you do to make sure that it's equitable for all. We're going to need to wrap this up, but I really want to say thank you again for coming in. And also to our listeners and to our viewers, I do want to remind you that we are going to have our athletic director, because Ridgewood has such an outstanding athletic program. So Keith Cook will be coming here, and we talked about Jeff Nias possibly coming in because the high school has the biggest student population, and we'll have a representative from Federated. Federated is how would you describe Federated?
It's a conglomeration of all the home and school associations.
Right.
So it's basically it seeks to align the efforts of the home and school association groups. They liaise with the Board of Education and myself, and frankly, our Federated group is a really is a go-to
fabulous
place also for us to hear from our constituents and the parents, and I get us keep a pulse as to what's going on in the schools and try to stay ahead of the curve. So Federated is a very important group here. Carolyn Holt, who's the Federated
phenomenal
president, is very engaged in the community, and so she's a great resource.
Yes. And so for listeners and viewers, I want to encourage all of you, again, to get on the website, to follow Ridgewood Public Schools on social media. I definitely go and look at Dr. Schwarz' State of the School address. Fabulous. And then stay tuned to us and learn more about the schools here. And if you have any questions, reach out to Christine, reach out to you. There's plenty of people. By the way, I think I also want to just say that the protocol is, if you have an issue at your school, the first place that you should go is get to an HSA meeting. A home and school association meeting is going to give you so much information about the district, about your school. And then, then there's a process. You go then to the principal. And your last resort over any issue should be to go to the Board of Education.
Yeah. Can I comment on that real quick?
Yes, please.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, because something that really helps us. We have a large and engaged community, so it's really helpful if people know where to go for what.
Right.
So we're working on, this is the kind of the next level of providing like basic guides to folks that are that are visually appealing. But for now, We do have some communication protocols on the site. And one of the things I will say, if you're a parent with a concern specifically about your child, the first place is usually the teacher if it's happening in a classroom. If it's elementary, it's almost always going to talk to the teacher first. But certainly then the next step would be the principal of school at the elementary level. At the secondary level, you might want to talk to an assistant principal or the principal. If you're ever not sure, you can always speak to your child's school principal. That's always a great place to go. But if you have questions about policies, the district in general, finances, you're welcome at the board meetings. You're welcome at the superintendent coffee. Things that are of general interest to the district, we're always happy to hear from folks.
Right.
But again, if it has to do with the specificity of your concern.
Sure.
If it's really related to your kid, it's going to be the best place to start in the school. If you're not happy with the outcomes, then there's an appeal process where you work your way up, and I'm happy to help once you've gone through those channels. But I'm not really the best person equipped to help a family with a specific student issue because I'm too far removed from the students at this point.
And if you're concerned about a specific issue at the campus at your school, you're going to find out all the information that you need to know at the HSA meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. And the principals go to those meetings, and my vision is that the principals are really effectively the CEOs of their building, so they should really have a strong handle on all things happening in their building.
Well, again, thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it.
It was great to be here. Thanks for having me, Jeannie.
Take care.